The Marvel movies are beloved by almost everyone, and it's easy to see why. On the other hand, DC films have always been a bit of a mixed bag. Now, the writer of Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice explains why Marvel films are more popular than DC films. In today's video, we're going to discuss why Marvel movies are so much more successful than DC, according to a DC writer. Before we get into the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the new videos we post. Why Marvel movies are so much more successful. For more than a decade, comic book movies have dominated the box office. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has grossed over $22 billion globally since the release of Iron Man in 2008. With the release of Man of Steel in 2013, DC attempted to follow suit with its own cinematic world. The DC Extended Universe has amassed millions of followers over the last 8 years, but it hasn't been nearly as unified or constant as the MCU. To date, only 9 DCEU films have been released, grossing $5.6 billion at the global box office. So why has Marvel had such a greater level of success than DC? One of the top screenwriters in the DCEU could have the solution. Screenwriter David S. Goyer was interviewed by The Hollywood Reporter last week. Goyer co-wrote the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy in addition to scripting Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. His contributions paved the stage for DC Films' entry. As a result, his remarks on DC's theatrical ambitions are particularly intriguing. When asked what he would do next if he were in charge, he said, "I think one of the issues is that Marvel's had consistent leadership for the last 15 years or more, whereas DC hasn't. There have been all these changes in terms of who is running DC. That is fundamentally very hard. It's hard to make any headway when leadership is changing." One of the other things that made Marvel incredibly successful is all of their adaptations are true to their source material. Ant-Man feels like Ant-Man. The Hulk feels like the Hulk. They don't try to change things up. I would say try to hew closer to what was the original intent. So it's having a consistent universe, having consistent leadership, and staying true to the source material. For more than 2 decades, Kevin Feige has been a steady hand at Marvel. He began his career as a producer on pre-MCU films, was named president of Marvel Studios production in 2007, and now oversees the entire firm. Since the MCU began in 2008, he has had a say in every endeavor, and it shows. That's not to claim he's exclusively responsible for Marvel's box office success, nor would he want to claim that, but having a single voice at the helm for more than a decade is one of the fundamental contrasts between Marvel and DC. DC is rumored to be working on a direct sequel to Man of Steel. For the time being, Goyer is concentrating on his new show, Foundation, which will launch on Apple TV Plus later this year. The best and worst Marvel movies. The MCU is the most profitable film series of all time, surpassing even the Star Wars franchise. The MCU has generated heroic characters and dictatorial villains coupled with some of the best action and humor of our time, averaging around $1 billion per film. Not every picture, however, was a success. Later entries like Captain America: Civil War, which had greater action and a wider cast of characters, pale in comparison to the first Thor film. Both industries have definitely produced some good and bad films to date. Avengers: Endgame. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's first 3 phases have come to a close, and it's a marvel. No movie has ever carried the weight of 21 prior films, but Avengers: Endgame does a fantastic job of serving as a payoff, not only taking audiences down memory lane, but also offering a satisfying finish to a number of character arcs. The spectacle is breathtaking, and despite the high stakes, the picture never loses sight of the breezy Marvel charm that has made this genre so popular. Avengers: Endgame provided satisfying resolutions to characters that had been teased for over a decade. It tied off the Thanos narrative with a bow, giving us a final combat scene that we'll see again and again. The film's only drawback is that we can't fully re-watch it in its entirety. It's great the first time you see it, and you're captivated by the screen from beginning to end. On consecutive viewings, the 3-hour length becomes much more apparent. Because of the unique way this story was handled, there will almost certainly never be another film like Endgame outside of the MCU. Yes, the time travel part is hazy at best, but it's a small gripe that even Endgame dismisses as absurd, given that the protagonists admit they only know about time travel from movies. Endgame, though, flies by for a 3-hour picture, and it serves as a fantastic climax. Even if the MCU will continue, with a few extra action scenes sprinkled throughout the film, this easily wins the top slot. Nonetheless, it's a fantastic picture with a thrilling finish for some of our favorite characters. The Incredible Hulk. It's almost unjust to include The Incredible Hulk on a list of Marvel Cinematic Universe films because it was clearly added after the fact. There are a few second unit shots and enhancements to make it feel like it's part of something greater, such as a fleeting sight of the Stark Industries logo, but it's evident that it's supposed to stand alone, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't believe that just because these films are part of a shared world makes them any less valuable because they aren't actively sharing all the time. The issue with Incredible Incredible Hulk is that it's tonally so discordant from the other Marvel films that it is actually a downer. It's a film that, when paired with Ang Lee's 2003 Hulk, makes you wonder if the character can stand on his own or if he needs to be linked with other superheroes to be fully realized. You have a character who, if left to his own devices, rejects his own superpower and is at best ambivalent about it. Other characters are required to flesh it out as a force for good and to give Bruce Banner a sense of belonging. That doesn't make The Incredible Hulk a poor film. Rather, it's a frustratingly mediocre one that's continually attempting to reconcile its tone and its lead character, and although it hasn't quite figured out the former, we've at least arrived at a satisfactory conclusion with the latter. The best and worst DC movies. The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is not just one of the most memorable superhero films, but it's also one of the most quotable, and we haven't even got to the film's most famous line, "Why are you so serious?" After the phenomenal Batman Begins, director Christopher Nolan analyzed the very idea of heroism, evil, and sacrifice for the sequel, and Heath Ledger played the greatest of all Jokers, that is, the most unfathomable and thus most terrifying. Before The Dark Knight, comic book movies were merely amusements, pleasant but fleeting, but they were held to a higher standard after The Dark Knight. After all, if Nolan could do it, there was no reason why superhero films couldn't be equally ambitious, sophisticated, and captivating. Since The Dark Knight, DC has struggled on numerous occasions, hampered by the extended shadow cast by the picture. But no superhero film from any studio has ever come close to matching it. The Dark Knight is a wonderfully fascinating crime narrative that is dark, complicated, and unforgettable. It succeeds not merely as an enjoyable comic book film, but also as a richly thrilling crime saga. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. If you don't believe Christopher Reeve when he says a Superman movie is a catastrophe from start to finish, you may try sitting through this bargain bin basement price picture made by Canon Films on a shoestring budget in which even the shoes and strings don't appear authentic. Nothing could save us from the monstrosity of Nuclear Man, a villain so lame that he's never mentioned in DC canon again. Gene Hackman seems to realize right away that he's just signed up for a shit show and hams it up his final run as Lex Luthor, but nothing could save us from the monstrosity of Nuclear Man, a villain so lame that he's never mentioned in DC canon again. Honestly, watch this fight scene. It makes us sad that Christopher Reeve had to do that. The Superman series reaches its nadir here. The action is dull, the visual effects are shoddy, and none of the performers seem invested in the plot's direction. Although both movie industries have had their fair shares of good and bad movies, it's safe to say now Marvel is dominating the movie scenes with its range of comic book-inspired movies. This is even acclaimed by a DC writer. If you enjoyed today's video, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel with post notifications turned on so you never miss out on any new and upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.